Beyond Reason Radio.
I just want to start the show today saying one thing, and it really should be common sense, but apparently I just have to say it. There are no easy choices for our country ahead in the next few weeks or few months. There are no easy choices. The choices we are going to have to make as a country are going to be tough ones to make. I'll tell you why. Right now in the United States, there have been over 34,000 deaths from coronavirus, from COVID-19. 34,000. That is a stunning number. It really is, in that short amount of time. Now, for those who say this is all just a hoax, let me just point out that, no, this is very serious. Ending April 1st, the month ending April 4th, there were 5,330 more deaths than expected in New York City. Ending April 4th. So the month from March 4th to April 4th, there were 5,330 more deaths. That's total deaths than expected. They believe that there was 3,350 coronavirus deaths counted, but that's probably undercounted. A lot of people think that they're overcounting, and they probably are in some cases, but they probably are undercounting as well, because when you have that many deaths total over the amount, that's a lot. So it's not like the rate of deaths in New York City is the same and they're just counting it differently. No, they had over 5,000 more total deaths in New York City. But here's the thing as well. I'm sorry to start with bad news, but it's kind of the way things are today. 22 Americans, this is also the bad news today. 22 million Americans have filed for unemployment benefits in the last 4 weeks. 22 million Americans. In fact, more Americans in the last 4 weeks have filed for unemployment than jobs were gained in this country since the Great Recession, over 10 years ago? 13 years ago when that happened? So you have the stunning number of deaths, especially in places like New York City. But then you also have to look at the stunning number of unemployment claims in just the past month. Now, I had some brilliant person on my social media, that was in air quotes, say, well, economies come back, dead people don't. The most intellectually shallow comment I've seen recently.
Sounds like something I'd say.
But, economies come back. Think about that. Tell that to the possibly millions of small business employees or small business owners whose companies, small businesses, will not come back from this. You say a general, economies will just come back. Everything will be fine eventually. When you have 22 million unemployed in 4 weeks and you have small businesses who already operate on thin margins, basically not giving revenues for a couple of months, they're not coming back. What do you tell them?
And just take a look at close to home, all the attractions, Disney, Universal, not only there, but everybody who services those attractions. They're all out of business.
So there are no easy choices. You have to look at the big picture. The deaths are stunning. We don't want to see that many deaths. But 22 million unemployed, that's stunning as well. We don't want to see the collapse of the American economy. And by the way, everyone's complaining about the Florida unemployment system, which is a mess. It needs to be fixed. It's inexcusable how antiquated that system is. It really does need to be fixed. But this is an example of why you should never, ever expect the government to bail you out in bad situations. And this is proof why we shouldn't give the government more power, because they will screw it up. You can blame the governors for maybe screwing this up, fine. But this is going to happen when government gets involved in stuff like this.
You mean they may screw up my health?
Yes, believe it or not. But we should just give them more power. Just like they screwed up the testing in the beginning, we'll just give them more power. Yeah. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on until 8 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio WFLA Orlando. We are also on Facebook Live as well. You can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. You can also follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. So, as I'm mentioning, one thing we are going to talk about in the show today is the fact that there are no easy choices. But what I'm also noticing is there are government leaders right now who are basically revealing to all of us in the midst of this crisis that they don't understand what their main job as a government leader, as a civil servant is. They don't get it. And they never got it. Most of them never got it. But this is really telling and really revealing to us how they don't get it. They think that their job is to take care of us and to make sure we're safe. They think that is their number one job. It is not their number one job. But an example of this would be the governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy. He was on Tucker Carlson, and he was asked a very good question, I thought. Wasn't a tough question. And his response is telling. Here it is.
By what authority did you nullify the Bill of Rights in issuing this order? How do you have the power to do that?
That's above my pay grade, Tucker. So I wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights when we did this. We went to first of all, we looked at the data and the science, and it says people have to stay away from each other. That's the best thing we could do to break the back of the curve of this virus that leads to lower hospitalizations and ultimately fatalities.
And I'm not contesting that, though. I think I do think there's a debate. This is a rolling conversation because we're learning new things every day, and nothing is settled at this point.
Understood.
But I do want, since you are an elected official, a leader in the government, an executive, how do you have the authority to order something that so clearly contravenes the Bill of Rights of the United States, the U.S. Constitution? Where do you get the authority to do that?
Well, here's the thing. We know we need to stay away from each other.
He has no answer. He wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights.
Holy cow.
Your main job as governor is to protect our rights. Is it not? But this is so revealing because, yeah, he wasn't thinking of the Bill of Rights in this instance, but he's probably never thinking of the Bill of Rights because he doesn't see his main job as protecting our rights. This is so telling of how so many elected leaders in this country look at things. They don't fundamentally understand what their true role should be. And we are seeing it. And of course, when you make this argument, they say, well, you just want people to die. You just want people to... No, I don't want people to die, but I also don't want to be a tyrannical country. I also want them to be free. Wasn't it Patrick Henry who said, give me liberty or give me death? Well, I don't want people to die, but I also want them to be free. Now, another example of this is the governor of Michigan. There was a big protest in Michigan yesterday where people drove to the Capitol and held a protest because of what the governor there is doing. Gretchen Whitmer. She basically had a stay-at-home order so strict that you could not even leave to see your neighbor or your family member. You could not buy plants at the store. And she was asked about this on MSNBC, and her answer here is, once again, stunning. Here it is.
So we just had snow. I've got snow on the ground here in Michigan right now in Lansing. We're expecting, up to 30 inches in the Upper Peninsula. The fact that we're cracking down on people traveling between homes or planting or landscaping or golfing really for a couple more weeks isn't going to meaningfully impact people's ability to do it because the snow will do that in and of itself.
So I'm taking away your rights, but it doesn't matter because
there's snow.
It's snow. So stay home. This is she's coming up with excuses. Now, I heard a comment earlier today I thought was brilliant. If it doesn't matter because there's snow, then why are you doing it in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you even putting these restrictions down if it doesn't matter there's snow? But see, their first thought is not, you have rights and we need to figure out a way to protect your rights and not infringe on your civil liberties. Their first thought is, no, you're stupid. I'm smarter than you. You do as I say. It's snowing anyway, so stay inside. I'm the governor. I'm above you. You're stupid. I know what I'm doing. You listen to me. And a lot of people have just had enough. And who can blame them? So she was on some liberal radio show. I don't remember what it's called. It's on satellite radio. And she was asked more about the protest that happened in Michigan. And, of course, her response is not to address the concerns of their protest. Her response is to trash those protesting. Now, I also want you to listen to the question from the host because that's telling as well. But then listen to Whitmer and her response. Oh, Tom, go ahead.
Let me just add something. You said this is to a liberal audience, a liberal radio station. So she's tailoring her response to the audience.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And the question was dumb, too, but here it is.
Why are people protesting your measures, which are literally intended to keep Michiganders safe?
Sadly, it really was a political protest. It wasn't necessarily about the policy. People said that they would drive by and not get out of their cars and would practice the CDC safe, the guidelines. They congregated at the Capitol without masks, standing close together. I saw an adult passing candy out to kids, bare hand to bare hand. These are people that came from all different parts of our state, congregated, did all of the things we know put people in danger, and then they're going to go back to those rural parts of Michigan and possibly take COVID-19 with them, or pick it up at a gas station as they filled up on the way in or the way out of town. I mean, this is how COVID-19 spreads, and it was definitely a political rally. I've not often seen a Confederate flag at the state capitol, and there were a few of them. There was someone that had signs that had the swastika on it. I mean, it was really a very political demonstration and rally, and it flies in the face of what we know we need to be doing to keep ourselves safe. They even lined up cars in front of a hospital and precluded an ambulance from being able to get in and out of the bay. So you just think about that clear image of them endangering other people, but then possibly spreading COVID-19. I think it's very likely some of these people are going to get sick, and they're going to contribute to us having to continue in this stay-home posture.
So you heard what she did there.
Yes.
She trashed
the rural people,
the protesters.
Yeah, from being from rural areas, that means our city folks are smarter than you are.
And most likely, most of them were doing the right things. There were Trump supporters, but most of the protesters, I'm sure, were keeping up with the guidelines. But she found a few, and she had to trash them for what they were doing. And they don't care about the safety. No, they don't care about safety. They just did this because she's a Democrat. That's her excuse there. But the question was, why would you protest something that keeps us safe? We are going to give up so much of our liberty in the future. If every time a governor says she does something just because of safety, we just say, okay, here it is. Take our liberties, take our freedoms, because you said safety. You said the word safety. So, and I always bring this up. Nobody has a good answer for it. If you really believe that we should give up our liberties for safety, there's a lot more things we should ban than just than just do stuff right now. You ban cars, ban all this other stuff. It could cause problems. So people are not thinking, once again, about the big picture. I don't want to see all these people die. I don't. But I also don't want to see the country go into complete economic collapse, which would lead to more deaths in the long run and more problems in the long run. There should be middle grounds here. We should be able to protect some of our freedoms while also protecting lives. But she is acting like a petty tyrant. So I'm going to play a voice of reason, the voice of reason of the day in the next segment. And I have a question. Are we as a country going to be able to make these tough choices? I'm not sure. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
President Trump, his administration, has released some of the guidelines for what he calls opening up America again. I thought I would just go over some of what's in it. Yes, of course, he's going to have that as his slogan.
New hat.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go. In a document provided to all 50 U.S. governors during an afternoon phone call, it says here that the benchmarks for... So there's multiple phases to this. But the benchmarks for the first phase include a sustained decrease in cases over a 14-day period and a return to pre-crisis conditions in hospitals. That's according to the document. The phased approach encourages all individuals to continue good hygiene practices like washing hands and to strongly consider using face coverings in public. The document encourages employers to enact social distancing, temperature checks, testing, and sanitation practices in their workplace. In the first phase of reopening, the document suggests schools that are currently closed should remain so, and employees who are able to telework should keep working from home. Large venues, including some restaurants, can open under strict social distancing protocols. Gyms can open as long as they maintain social distancing guidelines, but bars should remain closed. Phase 2 and 3 gradually decrease the recommended restrictions. So it seems pretty reasonable to me so far.
I mean, unless I'm missing something, it sounds, like you say, reasonable.
Yeah, it's pretty reasonable, and it's similar to actually what the governors have been kind of proposing. And a lot of this has to do with where you are in the country. Obviously, New York City is going to be behind most of the rest of the country in terms of easing some of these restrictions. But even when it comes to slowly easing some of these restrictions and having the phases, I'm honestly not sure the country is going to be willing to even to make that call right now, unfortunately. And an example of this is the fact that Dr. Oz, who's on Fox News a lot recently, he's being blasted today by many for what he said. Now, maybe he could have said it in a different way that was a little less insensitive, I guess. But I want you to listen completely to what he said here. And honestly, he's giving you the bold truth. But because what he's saying is uncomfortable, this might be an example of why I'm not sure the country is going to be able to make these tough choices in the next couple weeks. Here it is.
Well, first, we need our mojo back. Let's start with things that are really critical to the nation where we think we might be able to open without getting into a lot of trouble. I tell you, schools are a very appetizing opportunity. I just saw a nice piece in The Lancet arguing that the opening of schools may only cost us 2 to 3% in terms of total mortality. And, that's any life is a life lost. But to get every child back into a school where they're safely being educated, being fed, and making the most out of their lives with a theoretical risk in the backside, it might be a trade-off some folks would consider.
So he basically said there, the part that people are kind of upset about, he says it might be appetizing. But he made the point there, and he probably shouldn't have used that word, but he made the point there that there are some studies that suggest if we reopen schools, it might theoretically increase the mortality rate in this country by 2 to 4%. Now, that's not the mortality rate of children in the school. Some people interpret it that way. No, he's not saying kids would die at that rate. He's saying everyone in the country because the kids would spread it.
Right. The kids take everything home.
And he even mentions there, look, every life is important, but this might be a trade-off worth doing. And the unfortunate truth here is we're going to have to make some trade-offs in this. People are wanting a perfect answer where we reopen things and nobody else catches it and nobody else dies. And I don't know how we do that. I don't even think that's possible. But it's also not possible that you keep things closed for 12 months. So he's saying, look, as adults, as a country, once again, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have to make some tough choices, some uncomfortable choices, but choices that need to be made. But for even mentioning one of those tough choices, he is getting blasted for it. And this worries me because it makes me feel like we're not going to be able to make these tough choices as a country. That anyone who suggests reopening at all, oh, well, you just want people to die. It worries me. In the next segment, I'll play the voice of reason of the day. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
So I know I haven't had a lot of good news in this show so far. I am going to end with a little bit of good news. Basically, I'm going to end with some ways that we can kind of get out of this that are reasonable. There is some light at the end of the tunnel in this. So I'll end the show later on with that. But I do want to get to the voice of reason of the day. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. I'm your voice of reason ultimately, but I try to find other voices of reason that we can play on the show because a lot of people, no, you're not going to find it anywhere else, basically. You know, a lot of other shows out there, especially on the left, they just want to play sound bites, take people out of context, don't want to actually give you voices of reason. But the voice of reason today is our own senator here in Florida, Marco Rubio. He put out this video on Twitter, and I think he makes a lot of sense. And this goes with the theme of the show, that we have tough choices to make, but we can make those choices. And he's exactly right. Here he is.
No one can tell you for certain when all of this is going to end. But here are some fundamental truths that people need to hear, and they need to start hearing now. Number one, until we have a vaccine, the infection rate and the death rate is never going to be zero. Number two, any opening that we make that allow people to come in contact with more people is going to increase the number of infections. It's going to increase the number of deaths. Number three, what we are doing now is not sustainable long term. We cannot keep the country in this condition for 6 months, for 9 months, for a year until we have a vaccine. And number four, things aren't just going to go magically back to the way they were on March 1st. No matter what kind of openings we see, it will not be back immediately to business as usual. The big picture in all of this is that at some point in the near future, there are going to have to be changes to occurring restrictions. They're just not sustainable long term. And when those changes come, no matter how careful they are in making them, there are going to be increases in infections. There are going to be increases in the number of deaths, tragically. And so the difficult task before public leaders now is, how do you balance this? How do you manage that risk? If the standard is 0 new infections, 0 new deaths, or no surges at all, that's unrealistic. But also unrealistic is the belief that we can just open everything up and go back to the way things were on March 1st. So how do you manage all of this? Well, here's some guidelines in my view. The first is we have to have a system in place to rapidly test people, isolate them, and contact trace people they may have infected. Our hospitals have to have the capacity to handle any surges that may come. We have to identify what restrictions are going to remain in place, 6 feet apart in restaurants, in line, at grocery stores, etc., to try to limit as much as possible the growth of these infections. Number 4, what do we have in place to help people that are especially vulnerable to dying from this? And I think the most important development we can see in the near future is the development of an effective treatment of antivirals that keep people out of the ICU and keep people off of ventilators, maybe even keep them out of the hospital. This is the fundamental truths that we need to build on, and we need to set expectations clearly today because the road ahead will not be easy.
So I think that was a good voice of reason from Marco Rubio talking about the tough choices we're going to have to make. We're going to have to change some things, but we're also going to have to be realistic about the outcome. So another thing I've been doing on this show recently, because no one else is willing to do it, but I'm willing to do it, is defending people who I believe have been unfairly attacked, mostly by the left in the media. An example of this would be Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. He was on Tucker Carlson, and here's a little clip of what he said. That this is the clip that's been kind of making the rounds. So do you see the first Kennedy cut there, Tom Benson? Okay, go ahead and play that cut here real quick.
The shutdown slowed the spread of the virus at enormous cost, but it still spread. When we end the shutdown, the virus is going to spread faster. That's just a fact, and the American people understand that.
So he basically said we need to open up the economy, but when we do that and the shutdown, this virus will spread. He's getting blasted for this by many in the media, including Joe Scarborough and the team in Morning Joe. In fact, here's a little bit of what they said about Kennedy's comments, which I think is unfairly blasting him, and I'll tell you why in a moment, but here's what Morning Joe had to say about it.
Republican Senator John Kennedy of hard-hit Louisiana. And states should reopen despite acknowledging that would accelerate the spread of this deadly virus.
It's just one of the dumbest things I've actually heard him say, and he said so many stupid things over the past year, it's hard to count. I mean, he's from a state that, again, everybody went out to Mardi Gras. He says in his corn-pone made-up accent that we closed it down, people still died. He knows that without the social distancing, he knows without the lockdowns, he knows this. He may be playing stupid on TV. He may be acting like he's dumb as dishwater on TV, but he knows that without the social distancing, instead of 30,000 people dead right now, it'd probably be 300,000 people dead right now.
So they were blasting Kennedy for what he said. What a stupid thing. He knows that without social distancing, he just wants to reopen the economy, even though there's more deaths and blah, 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 blah. But I want you to actually listen to what Senator John Kennedy had to say in context. Because once again, they're taking him out of context. They play a little clip, and they're acting like all Senator Kennedy is saying is we just need to open it right now. Who cares if people die? That's how they're interpreting what Kennedy is saying. But when you listen to his comments in context, you will find out once again that that is not what he is saying. And in context, what he is saying actually makes a lot of sense and goes back to what I've been talking about throughout the show today, the theme that we are going to have to make tough choices, but things cannot stay as they are right now, which is totally true. Here's what he said, like I said, in context.
Number one, very, very soon, the can's going to run out of road. We got to open this economy. If we don't, it's going to collapse. And if the U.S. economy collapses, the world economy collapses. And trying to burn down the village to save it is foolish. That's a cold, hard truth. Number two, yes, we shut down. But the shutdown did not stop the spread of the virus. I wish it had, but it's too late for that. The shutdown slowed the spread of the virus at enormous cost, but it still spread. Number three, when we end the shutdown, the virus is going to spread faster. That's just a fact. And the American people understand that. So when we open up, and we're going to have to, and somebody's got to make the call, we've got to be smart about how we do it. Don't open up in the middle of a hot spot. Encourage your elderly and those with pre-existing conditions to stay quarantined and provide them financial support. Wear masks. Try to socially distance. Use technology without violating privacy to try to track the hot spots and track people who have been exposed. Test as much as we can. Make sure that we got health care capacity. Our governors and our president have been building up our health care capacity. But, you know, this is like choosing between cancer and a heart attack. It's a miserable choice.
It's amazing the difference when you actually listen to what he said in context, isn't it? So Joe Scarborough and everyone else on that show, they're blasting, oh, what an idiot, what are you saying? But when you listen in context, what did he say? He said, we have to open the economy because if the economy collapses, which it could if we don't open it up, that affects us and the rest of the world. True. He said that we did shut things down and the virus still spread. True. He also said that when we do open up, we have to be smart about it, not open up everywhere, not open up in hotspots, still do testing, still do some social distancing. Amazing how Joe Scarborough didn't mention that part of his comment there. No. They ignored his actual context, as I mentioned. But what Kennedy said there, once again, is true. And what was the last thing he said? He said, one of the things he said at the beginning I really liked is we're burning down the village to save the village. That's exactly what we're doing right now. And that's why he said it's not a smart choice. He didn't say that we should ignore the problem. He didn't say that he doesn't care about deaths. He didn't say that we should stop social distancing and all of that. He's merely being realistic about a solution not only to the virus, but also now to the economic crisis. And yet they blast him and take him out of context for basically saying what is true. He said at the end there, this is like choosing between cancer and a heart attack. There's no good choices. He's right. Why are we so unwilling to acknowledge that this is tough and that there are going to be tough choices? And that's what worries me, because people are apparently, our leaders, and especially those in the media, are not willing to make those tough choices. So I'll have some good news here in the next segment, and maybe something that made Yaffee Laffee. Yes, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Welcome back to the show. This is Beyond Reason Radio, Orlando Smart Talk Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, joined by Tom Benson in the studio. And Tom, how are you doing in there
I'm
today?
doing just fine.
You're doing good?
Absolutely. Especially one of my favorite people we're going to hear from next.
You're talking about the AOC cut I have playing? I wasn't even sure I was going to get to that, but now we have to.
I thought that might be your Yaffee Laffee.
I guess maybe it should be, but no. I don't know if she makes me laugh or cry sometimes. So I do have some good news I'll get to in a moment, but since Tom Benson mentioned it, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or as I like to call her, was on The View,
Oh, boy.
And she was talking about how this shows why we need socialism and blah, 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 blah. Here it is.
She certainly is in her element on The View, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Guaranteeing health care in this country is not about giving charity to people. It affects all of us. When the person who is preparing your food and serves you food cannot see a doctor, that puts you at risk. That puts all of us at risk. And, I think it's encouraging that a lot of people are saying, oh, you know what, because this is an emergency, we should shore up, make sure people have enough to pay their rent. Because this is an emergency, we should make sure that people can have access to a free test and go to a doctor. But ultimately, the question is, wasn't this an emergency before? If you needed treatment, if you need life-saving treatment for coronavirus, and you think that testing and treatment should be free, then why shouldn't that testing and treatment for diabetes, insulin, cancer, why shouldn't we be treating all sick people in this country as humanely as anybody else?
When I hear something like that, I say to myself, if that's true, why doesn't Congress give all Americans the same health package they enjoy? Because it's the Cadillac of what's out there.
Well, let's go beyond that. She mentioned food there, people getting their food. People need food. Why doesn't Congress provide everyone food?
That's right.
Everyone needs clothing. Why doesn't Congress provide everyone clothing?
Everyone needs a car.
Yeah, why don't we just provide everyone?
Everyone needs a smartphone. Oh, they tried that. Yes.
Obama funds. The problem with what she's saying is it's once again, well, people need it, so it should be free. Things cost money. They don't just exist. Our healthcare system doesn't just exist because it does. Diabetes tests and insulin and all those things she mentioned, they don't just happen. They don't just appear. They have to be produced and serviced and paid for, and they cost money. And this idea that, well, people need it is free isn't going to make it just happen. And the fact is that when you take away the profit motive, you take away innovation, you take away production value and competition, and all you add is cost. And when the costs keep going up and up and up, what do? They have to ration it. And then, once again, people are not going to get what they need. So just because you say it should be free doesn't take away the fact that it still costs money. So we play on people's emotions with that stuff, but we don't understand. Okay, I want to get to the good news here. The good news is, when looking at data from Florida, it's very interesting. 1,900 cases in people under 25 in Florida. No deaths for people under 25 in Florida out of 1,900 cases. 2,500 cases in people over 75, 360 deaths. These are the same numbers we're seeing across the world, basically. Very similar. The reason why this is good news, and another thing that happened, was most cases aboard the U.S. aircraft carrier are symptom-free. So there were 600 cases of coronavirus on that aircraft carrier where people were catching it.
Sure.
60% of those sailors were asymptomatic.
Huh.
What this means, why this is good news, is maybe there's a way we can reopen some of the economy and it's not going to just kill everyone. Maybe we should focus on protecting the most vulnerable of us. And it can be done. Maybe that's something I'll talk about in a future show. Real quick here, let's get to a Yaffee, something that made Yaffee Laffee. So once again, it's from our friends at the Babylon Bee. Of course, that's where I have to go if I need something to make me laugh.
Sure.
Here is the headline from the Babylon Bee. China impressed by Michigan governor's totalitarian policies. In a candid speech Tuesday, President Xi stated he was pretty impressed by Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer's handling of the coronavirus outbreak, specifically praising her totalitarian policies. China's dictator said he was actually a little jealous. He hadn't thought of some of her ideas himself. She has some pretty good ideas, she says, stopping people from gathering together, even with their families, ordering people not to buy seeds. They can't even plant their own food now? We hadn't even thought of some of these innovative approaches. That's what the communist president said. We're always looking for more ways to oppress people, and we were really inspired by Whitmer's approach. Not bad, Gretchen.
That's satire, folks. Just not a real news story.
Yes, the Babylon Bee is satire. It continues on. It says other dictators across the world also chimed in with words of support and affirmation for Whitmer's policies. From North Korea ruler Kim Jong-un to Supreme Leader of Iran Ali Khamenei, the Chinese government quickly offered Governor Whitmer a consulting position with the Communist Party of China, which she readily accepted. Yeah, I heard someone make the point this week that, even in North Korea, as oppressive as that country is, you can still go visit your family members.
Yeah.
Like some of what
until they get a hold of this idea. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, some of what she's doing is so oppressive right now that even, this is satire. Like you said, it's funny, but you're laughing because there's an element of truth to this because it's
beyond
crazy.
reason.
It is beyond reason. So I hope that will make you laugh at the end of this show. I know that I was mentioning some tough things, but it's what we have to do. And I feel like there's a lot of people not willing to do it because for some reason, even this, we're split in our political divides. I don't understand how that is, but for some reason, that's just the way things are in today's world. And there shouldn't be a split. There needs to be a comfortable middle ground on this. We cannot collapse the economy, but we also have to save the vulnerable. And we don't want to see more and more people die. There's got to be a way to try to do both the best we can. It's going to be tough. But hey, we're Americans. I think we should be able to do it. Appreciate you listening to the show. If you missed any of the show, as always, you can catch the podcast on the iHeartRadio app or at iHeart.com. Like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. Follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you guys next time.